Okay, so using shears then. Hand shears seem a bit archaic, and I know you all want to get onto the lovely petrol devices. Hand shears do mean that you actually think about what you're doing, right? And when you look down this hedge, it's reasonably straight. Okay, if you went there like a bull in a china shop with sort of electric hedge trimmers, you can soon find it's not particularly straight. Now, ideally, I have to sort of be honest and say these should be a very slight A shape. Anyone know why we have an A shape on them? Don't know if Charlotte said this already or.
Yes.
Or it doesn't shade.
You have said this, so it doesn't shade at the bottom. Now the trick really with shears is to get your starting place. So you look down this way, down that way, and you try and see if you can see a line. You can look right from the edge, right from the end here, and look down. You're looking for any bits which really bow out. Okay? If we start, we'll do the cardinal sin. Start
in the middle.
Because I think I know pretty much where I am. It's always better to start near the top, okay, and give it just a little bit of a trim. And then you give yourself a starting point on this. So work your way down and try, and then it's difficult, it's no funky chickens. Okay? You keep one arm straight and move the other one. Okay? So if you're doing this, right, it's far too much movement, you'll look ridiculous. Okay? We may find it amusing and we'll probably film you, okay, to a suitable soundtrack. Okay? But try and keep one arm straight. The reason for that is that you're bringing just one blade down to cut. So the other one is acting as your direction. Okay? You just get yourself your level you want to cut to, look down, and then just start to take off. Better take off a little bit less perhaps than more. And once you've got your line, you can start to move along. So use the blade that isn't moving, so this top one in this case is sort of line, okay? And you can look, check that you are keeping to your line. And move along the hedge. Okay? You can then just start to move down. I tend to favour moving down a hedge because the problem with moving up, you think it's got to be narrower at the top, right? The problem with going up with these is this. Okay? And you see the number of hedges which end up wide at the top because people are either, not so much with either, those shears, those petrol shears are getting heavy and you start to get it thicker at the top. So if you get your top line in and move down, you can always err on the side of caution. And then once you start to hit your iron, you'll see, am I moving out, am I moving in? And then fairly quickly you can start to, and the other thing is not to, if you need to move forward, step forward, okay? So try and, that's another advantage of keeping one arm, if you can, sort of tight to your side. You don't have to be like this, you know, so I cannot move the elbow must stay firm because that will be a little bit too rigid, okay? And what you're aiming for is cutting the branches as well, not that the leaves themselves this time of the year are less of an issue, okay? And look down, if I'm happy with that. Just a bit down here, okay?
What do you reckon?
Well, you've all got to say yes, wonderful job. You want to pass it, of course, don't you? And of course I'm doing the actor's words trick now. I'm standing on back to the camera so you can see what I'm doing. But if you see what the idea of this is that you, as you step back, you'll see you've missed bits, so you can just move backwards and forwards. And whilst it might seem that using hand shears is a slow job, actually, if the hedge is cut regularly and if it's cut along the sort of the right template, it's not that difficult to use. Because the thing you all heard me do this in the landscape building. If you want to know if your shears are cut in properly, listen. You should get a zzz as it zips up the whole blade. Listen for it. Look if you think you're missing somewhere. It's not starting from the very bottom of these aren't cutting, but the rest of them are. Okay? It's more important that they meet and grind against each other when you're cutting than it is to go and get them sharpened. Because if you sharpen them and they're not actually meeting, not properly tightened, and this has a rather helpful wing nut on there to tighten them. Some of them have double spanner things, which you have some sort of engineering kit to tighten them up. You can tighten them very slightly if you think that'll help with the noise. If you find they get a bit stiff, you can always loosen them as long as they're still meeting. But it's important they meet. Okay, because you think this is just a pair of scissors. And like I say, sometimes on some old shears you actually got one big blade. You can actually get, believe it or not, left-handed or right-handed shears with one big round blade, which shows you that's the cutting blade which you're watching for, so you can see it easily going through the hedge. That's quite an old device. You'll see all these wavy edge ones. I've never been particularly impressed with them, to be honest with you. I think that and there's a little notch at the bottom which is supposed to be for cutting off thick branches. That's a reason for it. Any thick branches which are sticking out, there won't be any on these. You can cut those back into it to make sure you don't start getting lumps on hedges. Okay?
The harder thing will happen if Mick can demonstrate is the top of it, and that's why.
Good point. The top, better really to start from.
But can you see the disadvantages about how tall this hedge is?
Again,
yeah.
I can make the cardinal sin and do it from the middle, simply for the sake of the camera. You find your top line, have your shears up that way first off. Okay? Just get that top line in. What you do is you go right the way along it. Normally when you cut a face already, it's important at this stage that you remove material because it all looks the same when it's cut. Okay? And you go along, you don't try and go too far in first off and you get that top line. You can set a string line. It's a good idea to set a string line on it. The problem is I spend so much time tying together the string line which you'd all cut. And so many of you using shears and some of this, but you set the string line, usually something like orange or yellow string so you can see it against the foliage. All these tasteful jute things which you buy in the garden centres don't show up against this so you can't see them. The other thing you can do as well, ranging poles, which are big stripy poles we used to use in surveying, you can lay those out at the right angle to get it so you can go from one to the next because it's quite difficult to maintain a slight A shape. You don't want it to be looking like some kind of contemporary geometric topiary. It's only a very, very slight drop into the top that you want. So you can maintain that by using ranging poles put down there. You don't have to put lines or anything on the looks of it, but you can see one to the next. You can look down them and see if anything's sticking out from them. Okay? So depending upon the finish you want, for these they're a fairly standard Carpinus hedge, hornbeam hedge. So a really tight face isn't actually worth doing on them unless you're doing a summer cut. This time of the year, you're just trying to maintain the general dimensions of them. Make sure you get rid of all this flushing growth on the top. Like I say, get your top line in, and it's important really, I don't know how many times I've seen this, if one person starting from one end of the hedge at the top and the other person starting from the other, you'll end up with a step as you come towards it. A step or a ramp will not actually do. Tops of hedges are what you see. When you walk down here, if the top of that hedge is wavy, the whole thing looks out. If the top line is in, and this is the same with many aspects of landscape, but if you can get edges and surfaces level, you will have a good standard of finish in terms of a landscape. I know it sounds simple, you're probably thinking, is this what I'm paying £9.5 for? So it's coming in as blokes here about surface and edges. But actually, simple jobs like that, and from your point of view as supervisors in the future and managers, you need to be able to go out and you need to be able to say, what's wrong with that hedge? Well, it's wavy on the top. If you sorted that out, it'd look better. They'll think, oh, this person knows what they're talking about. Okay? So it's important, therefore, that you establish a height that you're going to work to. And it might be that maybe one of you does one edge and you carry on.
Yeah, we'll space them out nicely.
Corners are important as well. It's better, one person doing a corner if possible, so you get the corner down because, of course, the corner is another edge you'll be judged on, But take your time with this. The object of the day today is not to get you all working at some sort of commercial rate, or we wouldn't really have you out with these. The reason, as I said earlier, I learned to cut hedges with these because this is the way you learn how a hedge is cut. Okay? Once you can do it, you can get all these wonderful devices you have a bit of practice with today to see how to speed it up. But it's like anything, you cannot do it fast until you've learned to do it. Now I know some of you think, well, you should see me driving, I'll tell you about fast. That's why lots of young people have accidents straight away after passing their test, because they've passed the test, but they haven't yet really learned to drive and all the pitfalls. So it's a case where we're just going to make practice,